Talking about social media risks in business, and I have my glasses on because I am reading from my beautiful little chart that's in my new book, What is Intellectual Property? And I can't do it without my glasses. So what are the risks of social media in business? Well, the first one is pretty obvious, bad reviews. But to be honest, you can get bad reviews without social media. It just makes it more accessible to people to review you. And remember, if somebody's putting up a review that is not honest or you think is really unfair, you can complain to that social media platform. So a review on social media is actually quite good because you can take steps if you think it's inappropriate. Reviews in other places are not so easy to counteract. There is a risk on social media of people going ahead with this excitement of naming and shaming. If somebody has done something that you're not happy with, say you've got a web developer to design your website and you're not happy, often people will ask on social media, what should I do? And then people climb on the bandwagon and say, name and shame, name and shame. The problem with that is that naming and shaming is the reason you're putting the information on the internet is to make sure that people think less highly of that person, the web developer, and that could amount to defamation. Now, I know in some states truth is a defense to defamation, but not all states and not all countries. So naming and shaming, I recommend you steer clear of. If you have a proper legal dispute, speak to a lawyer, take it further, but if you name and shame, you could end up being the party being sued because you're the one who might have defamed the other person. Also, be careful of giving off-the-cuff or incorrect advice. So if somebody says, oh, what should I do? This person didn't do my website well. And if you advise them to name and shame, then you could be responsible if they follow your advice. So it's tempting, but try and avoid that kind of thing. And especially if they follow your advice and then they suffer a loss, that could be problematic. That could come back to bite you. So for example, if they say, can I claim XYZ on my tax? It's better to say, well, here's a link to the ATO site that lists everything you can claim. Rather than say, oh yes, I claim, what did I see the other day on, I think somebody was claiming a bikini and a boob job. I'm not sure what her job was, but if you give the advice and the person gets it wrong and then they get fined, they could then say, but I relied on your advice. You didn't tell me you weren't an accountant. So be careful of that. There's also a risk on social media of employees tarnishing your reputation. Now, what do I mean by this? When the Dreamworld tragedy happened and the people were tragically killed on that roller coaster ride, obviously everybody was in shock, and Dreamworld's priority was to look after people and to assure the public that their rides were safe, and it obviously didn't look very good for them, but they had an employee who started then making very inappropriate comments and jokes about the tragedy that had happened. And his statement was, well, it's my private Facebook page. I have got a sick sense of humor, and if I want to say disgusting things, that's up to me. Of course, it reflected terribly badly on Dreamworld in a difficult situation. And the only way to really avoid that kind of thing is to have a social media policy that ensures that your employees agree, and your contractors as well, agree not to use social media in a way that's going to denigrate your business reputation. So that is quite important, because there are people out there who will make comments about things that we wouldn't think are appropriate, but they think it's funny. So you do have that risk of employees tarnishing your reputation. There is also a risk of inadvertently giving away confidential information and trade secrets. I have seen this, surprisingly, where people think because they're posting in a closed group, the information's not going to go any further. However, there's no restrictions on the closed group. Somebody in that closed group sees some useful information and then goes and uses it in their own business, and the person who initially posted it is upset. Alternatively, you could have the situation where one of your employees innocently reveals, you've got a big book launch coming up and you were trying to keep that information confidential. So again, having policies and tight control of information can help you with that. And then the last one I wanted to cover is inadvertent copyright infringement. And that can take place in a number of ways. It can take place if you use somebody's images from their sites. So if you copy something that you see on social media and then post it in as a post of yours, that would likely amount to copyright infringement. So if you see a picture of a sunset and then you save that image and then repost it, not repost it, you save that image and post it as a fresh post, that amounts to copyright infringement. But if you use the social media platform's acknowledged way of sharing things, so on Facebook that would be sharing the post, you've sent it on, other people can see it, but you haven't reused it as though it's your own original content, then you're fine. So if you're sharing it, retweeting it, that kind of thing, that's fine, but not making a copy and then posting it as though you're the original poster. And this actually happened to me when I answered some questions on a Facebook group, and it was questions about intellectual property, and I had answered the questions, and then somebody copied my answers, took them and reposted them in another page without me knowing this, reposted it in another group. I did not know that they had done this. The problem that I had with that is, one, they didn't say that this information came from me. So my purpose of answering questions on Facebook is to raise my profile, and this person was not doing that. The second thing is that, well, they didn't have my permission. And the third thing was that I had been answering questions, and she had copied and pasted little bits of my comments, but without the original questions appearing in what she posted. So what ended up being posted was very different from the conversation that I had been involved in. And anybody reading that could have misunderstood the information that was provided. So that taught me that other than a very short answers to what people ask online, I generally will, if somebody's asked a serious question, I will either record a video and give my answer by video. I'll upload the video on social media that people can share. Then they'll know that the information came from me. Or I create a blog on my website and I send the link to my blog, and people who want to read answers to that particular topic can click on the blog, and it's all there in the format that I've decided it should be. So in that situation, somebody else in the second group saw what had happened and let me know, and she was quite agitated about how I was going to deal with it. But all I did was I contacted the admin of that second group and I said, look, so-and-so, the lady who saw it actually sent me screenshots so I could see exactly what had been posted, because I wasn't a member of the second group. And so I just forwarded that on to the admin of the second group, and I said, a member of your group has copied and pasted my comments without my permission. They've taken them out of context. It looks like they're giving legal advice when they're not qualified to give legal advice. They haven't acknowledged me, and I have not agreed for my advice to be posted in your group. And I did it in a very calm and approachful, gracious way. I didn't want to sound aggravated, even though I was very aggravated. I wanted to sound calm and reasonable, and that's how my message came across. And the admin was horrified. She contacted the other lady. The other lady said, yes, I copied it and pasted it and posted it as though it was my post. So the admin removed that post immediately, and I've never had the same kind of problem again. So yes, there are some issues that social media can raise in business, and you can also be responsible for your staff behavior on social media. I've just remembered one last thing. There was a case where two people had an argument at work, Annie and Betty. Now, I think the argument was to do with something to do with work. And at the end of the day, Annie went home and she went, I don't even want to have anything more to do with Betty. I'm just done. And she didn't want the argument and the insults to continue online. So what Annie did was she unfriended Betty on Facebook. Betty was furious because I think it was because now she couldn't see what Annie was posting, and she thought Annie was posting about her when Annie was over it. Annie wasn't posting about her. Anyway, Betty complained to her supervisor. Her supervisor said, that is Facebook. That has nothing to do with work. That's your private social media. I'm not going to get involved. And Betty wasn't happy, so she took that complaint to Fair Work Australia. And Fair Work Australia said the employer was responsible and the employer was at fault for allowing Annie to unfriend Betty after a work argument, and the employer had to pay a fine of tens of thousands of dollars because they had allowed what they called workplace bullying. So even though the unfriending event was on Annie's private Facebook page, happened after working hours, the employer was found responsible. And even though Annie was trying to de-escalate the situation, she just didn't want a fight going on Facebook. She'd had enough. So social media can be a little bit of a wild west for business owners, but if you know which kind of things to avoid, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be using it for your business. And in fact, it is the way that the world is going now. So if you're a business owner, have social media policies for your staff, even for yourself. When you receive a bad review, you suddenly get a rush of adrenaline and then you want to shoot off at the mouth. No, have a policy for yourself, a little checklist. Don't respond within 24 hours. Give yourself time to calm down. And those policies, and refine them as you go along. As you find things that don't work or things that go wrong, then refine them so that they're better and better. There was one situation where my husband, who's my business partner, he needed to speak to somebody who works for a client of ours. So he had never spoken with this person before, so he thought, he'll just look her up on social media, see who it is that he's dealing with before he talks to her. And he went onto her private page, and there were naked photos of her on her, it was her own private page, fair enough. Her personal page, it wasn't private, it was available to be viewed by the public. And so there were naked photos, and there was other very suggestive information and posts, and not the kind of thing that particular client, who was very conventional and very, I'll say, like sort of a quiet, conventional kind of business. I'm fairly confident that they would not want that kind of thing associated with them. And this person who my husband was going to speak with had completed the About section on her Facebook page, including our client's details as her employer. So it might be that one of the things you put in your social media policy is that if people are going to post things that don't fit with your firm's culture, then they don't acknowledge that you are the employer on social media, because otherwise you will be associated with those posts. So enjoy the social media jungle in your business. My name is Catherine Warburton, and I am the Legal Lioness.